We're now going to hear from Kamael Sugrim, the co-founder and COO of People First RH, speaking about measuring exclusion for better inclusion. And again, please continue to put thoughts, comments, questions into the chat, and then Kamael can address them through her talk and at the end.
So as Sonia said, I'm Kamael Sugrim. I am the co-founder and COO of People First. People First is a software platform that focuses on resolving workplace conflict. And I am going to share my screen and my slides. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how you can achieve greater inclusion by actually measuring exclusion. And it's an interesting thing because I think that a lot of people don't talk enough about exclusion when they're having a conversation about inclusion. And to me, that's a really critical piece of the conversation that's missing, and a really critical piece of what we need to really understand and get a better handle of in order to achieve greater inclusion. So there are a lot of definitions around inclusion. There's a lot of things on the internet, and a lot of people have published a lot of great research on it. But I think the best way to understand inclusion is actually looking at a graphic, because this is what exclusion looks like. So on the left, you can see that it's pretty clear that whatever is outside of that main circle is being excluded. And it's because it's different, or it just doesn't fit in. And I think as a society, we really understand exclusion, or so we think, and we really understand where there are instances where people are being excluded, whether it's a race, nationality, a culture, a gender, or just any type of people that are not being integrated into society are therefore being excluded. But the interesting part of this graphic, I think, is in the middle, which is integration. And a lot of people confuse integration with inclusion, which is what you'll see on the far right, which is that we can bring different types of people and groups and entities into an organization or into a culture, but they can still not be included. They can be integrated, but they don't actually have inclusion. And this is a very powerful, I think, and somewhat dangerous graphic in the middle, because we can fool ourselves into saying, yep, we have inclusion, but the people that are on the outside, they're still on the outskirts, and they're still not completely integrated into our culture or our society or our organizational structure. And then on the right, this is actually what inclusion looks like. It's when everybody has a voice at the table, everybody has an opportunity, and everybody has the ability to move and advance in society. How do you create an inclusive workplace? Most organizations look at whether their employees are being respected, whether there's a feeling of belonging, empowerment, and progression. And the way that they look at this information is they often go through surveys, and they ask their employees how they feel about these things. And I think what I've learned from surveying, and also what a lot of people say in surveying, is that there's a sense of bias that often happens in a survey. You could be trying to understand inclusion in a survey, but still have a lot of blind spots. For example, you can say, someone can say, your whole organization can say, I feel like I belong, and 87% of your employees can say that. But what's really important is the 13 that said they didn't. And is that 13 being excluded? And is that 13 similar in race, in gender, in nationality, in age, and all the things that we can sort of use to exclude people? So I think surveys are great to try to get a pulse of how an organization is feeling, but they can also leave you with a lot of blind spots and places where the data may lead you to believe that you have inclusion, but you may not actually have it. So we think that there's a different set of words that we can use to talk about inclusion. And that's actually by looking at the behaviors of exclusion. And those behaviors are bullying or harassment, discrimination, intimidation, and retaliation. Now, these aren't words that anybody really likes to hear. It's not comfortable. You just want to get rid of these things in society, and they don't make us feel really good about ourselves. But they are behaviors that exist, and these are the behaviors that actually derail inclusion. And they're the things that stop any type of progression that you're trying to make towards creating a more inclusive society or organization. The interesting thing about these behaviors is they're actually measurable. The other interesting thing about these behaviors is they're actually illegal. There are laws in place that say, you can't bully or harass someone in a workplace, and you can't discriminate, and you can't use tactics of intimidation. And retaliation is another form of bullying, harassment, or discrimination. So while these words are really uncomfortable for us to look at, they're actually things that we should be looking at, because there are things that are actually against the law to do. And that's the beginning of how we started People First. So People First, as I mentioned, is a software platform that looks at achieving greater inclusion for organizations by helping them measure exclusion. We have a very simplified way of allowing employees to report any type of discrimination, harassment, bullying, or retaliation that they're experiencing. We've created some really interesting features, I think, that have in the past stopped people from reporting and from bringing this kind of information forward, which is we've created a very transparent and clear way to report. We have a feature called automatic escalation, which means that where your case is or incident is, everybody knows, and it's clearly defined and it's time bound. So that ambiguity about experiencing something very difficult and then deciding to speak up about it and then not knowing what's going to happen with your information, we've removed that with our software. We also have a very clear resolution mechanism, which allows the employee and the employer to work on resolving these incidents. I think it's really important when you have an incident of discrimination or harassment to ask the person who's being discriminated or harassed what they want. And that's what we do in our software. So anyone that files a report actually states what they'd like to see happen in the report. And that's where HR or any other entity that's working on the solution, working on the resolution, that's where they begin. A case can only be marked as closed when there's mutual agreement. And there's a lot of that's a really important feature, I think, in the software, because it means that you're balancing out the imbalance of power that's existed, that's allowed a lot of discrimination and harassment to happen in the past by having people agree to the resolution that they want. We also check in on retaliation, making sure that people, once they've reported, are still working in a safe environment. But I think probably the most interesting part of our platform, at least for me, being a bit of a nerd, is the analytics and insight that it gives you into this problem. By understanding where you have discrimination, harassment, or bullying, you understand where you have exclusion. And by understanding where you have exclusion, you can specifically work on fixing some of the things that are happening in your organization and that are unique to your organization. Every culture is different. Every organization and every entity has a different problem that they face in their culture. And it's really important to have that specific information to know how to address some of the challenges that are really and truly keeping you from having an inclusive workplace. I know earlier in Jason's presentation, he mentioned, the importance of being kind. And I think people have the intent to be kind, but they also have biases and they also can discriminate kind of in the same manner as they can be kind. There's such a thing as kind discrimination, or what we call kind bullying, which is kind of called being condescending. These are still things that keep people down, and they should be able to report. And it's really important for an organization to understand this side of the data that is specific to the challenges that they're facing if they want to create a more inclusive environment. So let me tell you a little bit about what's been happening with the platform. The People First has been around for a little over a year. We have about 70 customers and 5,000 users on the platform. And this is what's been happening with our solution. People are reporting on a broad range of issues, things that have to do with unwanted sexual advances, interference with work performance, insults or put downs, offensive jokes, physical assault or intimidation, and even offensive objects or pictures. When someone files a case, they actually tell you what is the behavior that they experienced and what attributes they believe that that behavior was based on. So was it based on race? Was it based on gender, ethnicity, age, sexual orientation? All of these things they can report. So not only are you understanding the behaviors that are happening in your organization that are causing exclusion, but you also understand on what basis those behaviors are being based on. You know, do you have a workforce that is somewhat biased towards a specific gender or a specific sexual identity or a specific culture or race? And understanding those nuances allows you to be really specific about the changes that you want to make in your organization and about the plans and actions and the training that you want to have. Our platform is actually has 100% mutual resolution of all of the incidents that have been filed in the solution. All the cases have been resolved in average of 18 days, and the range is from 3 to 34 days. And we have 75% employee adoption. The platform is a voluntary adoption. Even though your organization may have it, you still have to download the solution on your phone to use it. And we found that 75% of the employees have downloaded the solution within the first 20 days of People First rolling out. This is a pretty interesting stat for us as a company, because one, it helps us really understand what's happening with our customers, but I think it also makes a lot of people realize that a problem that you thought was very difficult to solve is actually very easy to solve if you just focus your resources on it and you put in a proper solution to get people to resolve some of the challenges that they're facing. 18 days is a little over 2 weeks to resolve an incident where there's been some discrimination, harassment, or bullying. And that's not a long amount of time. The EEOC has some stats out on how long it takes a company to resolve discrimination. And that's actually, their stats say it's actually 275 days. So just to give you a little perspective, 275 days is how long it takes to birth a child. And on our platform, organizations are resolving these issues in about 18 days. I think what that allows for an organization to do is to actually get to the root cause of a problem, to not let the feelings of discrimination and harassment seep and simmer into the organization longer and create more of a poor culture. And it also gives them the information that they need to really understand what are the challenges that the employees are facing. The resolutions that people are asking for are completely doable. I think we think that harassment and discrimination, requires a big court case and a big media splash. But in actuality, what people are asking for are things like, I would like to have a different manager. I would like someone to receive training. I would like someone to apologize. And when you think about these actions, they're actually pretty doable and they're very easy to do once you realize that's actually what is needed to really get at the heart of exclusion. And so I'm gonna, I have, just one last slide. And I think that when we think about exclusion, we want to measure on things that are positive words like empowerment and, feeling included or feeling part of an organization. But I think what we need to do is really look at the data that is causing exclusion. And although that data is uncomfortable, it's actually the data that we need if we really truly want to change the way society works today. So with that was my last slide. I can go ahead and open it up for questions. So the first question is, any idea what still doesn't get reported? I think, I think it really varies by the type of organization. So I think, you know, uh, probably what people don't report are things where they feel like they um, are not sure if it was discrimination or harassment. So we do actually have people that have reported, have started reports, but have not completed them. And it's usually because I think someone's been rude. It's like the first time, and they're trying to figure out if it's a repeated behavior and if it's a one-time thing. So I think those are the incidents where people don't report, where they're sort of trying to figure out if this is you know, a sentiment that was just something that was misspoken or missaid, or if it's actually just, an act of discrimination. And what we see is people typically start those reports and they just kind of leave them open, and then they kind of come back to them and start to add more information to them. The next question is, have any of the incidents resulted in litigation? No, actually, one of the interesting things about the platform is it's actually built. So if you don't get a resolution within your organization, you can actually file that case with your local EEOC. But all of our cases, as I mentioned, have been 100% mutually resolved, and they've all been resolved at the first or second level of escalation. And no case has made it through to the highest level of escalation in a company, which is typically the CEO or the head of the organization. So while we do have that feature that you could take a case to litigation if you so wanted, we haven't come anywhere close to it in our cases because they're just being resolved at a much rapider rate than I think if the software wasn't there. In the trends to large versus small organizations, this is a really great question because we actually have quite a few small organizations that are less than 25 people on the platform, and we have some bigger organizations that are on the platform. And I would say that there are cases in the smaller companies. I think what it does is it provides someone in a smaller company actually a lot more safety in reporting, because when you're a small organization, everybody knows everybody. It's only 25 people, and you might not feel that you can report something, but the software allows more people to speak up. And I think that's actually really great for an organization, because at a 25-person organization, and if you're growing an organization, this is where your culture is made. And so it's really important as a small company to have this in place as well as a large company. And we see what we expect to see in large company. We see more cases, we see them across different divisions, but we still see quite a few cases in small companies as well. Can I describe the types of organizations I'm working with? So we have public and private companies. We have all over the US, and one company with an entity in the UK. The size of the companies range from anywhere from 6 employees to close to 1,000 employees. We recently signed a partnership with NAWIC, which is the National Association of Women in Construction. And so we'll be onboarding about 50 construction companies over the next couple of months, and they will range in size. What's really interesting about that, I think, is that when you think of a company, you might often think of a office structure, although these days no one's in an office, but you might think of an office structure, but a construction site is an office structure for the construction industry. And so it's really exciting for us to move into spaces and types of companies that are probably non-traditional. Schools are that as well as like restaurants. There's a lot of industries where workers are being marginalized and their rights are being marginalized. And they're outside of the walls of an office. So that's been very exciting. Did I miss any other questions? How about the trends in verticals, tech versus servers versus financial? I would say that what we've found is that every industry that we've are in has cases in it. So I wouldn't say that there's an industry that uses your software that doesn't have cases. I think tech has a small, slightly more cases than some of our other industries. But I also think what's interesting is that tech cases are resolved within a matter of days. So in the tech environment, perhaps there is a lot of discrimination and harassment that's happening, but what we do see also is that their cases are being resolved fairly quickly. And I think that speaks to probably maybe the comfort of using technology as a vehicle to have this conversation. Also maybe the age group of employees in tech companies, which tends to be younger than some other industries. So I think that every industry is showing that it has this challenge. The other question is, how do we define resolve? So a case is resolved when both the employee and the employer agree that the case is closed, that the employee has received the resolution that they want from the employer, and both the employee and the employer mark the case as closed. So an employee can't mark a case as closed, but an employer can't mark a case as closed without the agreement of the employee. And that I think is really important, because if you don't agree on the resolution, then you have another form of bullying where an employer says, this is what we're going to do, and you just have to accept it. And we don't, and that doesn't actually lead to any kind of behavior change in an organization.
We now need to move on to the next panel, but this is really fantastic. Thank you so much.
Sure.
For your talk and for answering all those questions.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, guys. Nice to meet you.